The ocean roared with an untamed fury as James Faulkner stood on the private balcony of his beach villa, feeling utterly disconnected from the empire he'd built. The 35-year-old publishing magnate had come to Sandpiper Beach Resort seeking solitude, but found only emptiness in the sprawling luxury accommodation. 3 consecutive bestsellers from his publishing house, Faulkner Press, had catapulted his net worth well into 9 figures, but the constant pressure had taken its toll. His doctor had been blunt: take a break or face a breakdown. So here he was, alone on the most exclusive stretch of California coastline, trying to remember what relaxation felt like. "Mr. Faulkner, your requested amenities have been delivered," called a discreet voice from inside. "Leave them by the door," James responded, not turning from the ocean view. The staff were well trained enough not to intrude further. He'd specifically requested minimal interaction during his stay. The less people recognized him, the better. As the footsteps retreated, James closed his eyes, letting the salt air fill his lungs. His assistant had booked him for a month at this secluded resort, and James had initially balked at the idea of being away from headquarters for so long. But after 3 days, he was starting to understand the appeal of disconnection. No manuscripts to review, no marketing strategies to approve, no decisions that affected hundreds of employees and authors. Just as he was considering another solitary dinner in his villa, a movement on the neighboring balcony caught his eye. The villa beside his had been empty since his arrival, but now a woman emerged, her chestnut hair dancing in the coastal breeze. She wore a simple sundress and appeared completely absorbed in the sunset. Not noticing his presence, James found himself watching her unabashedly. There was something captivating about her profile silhouetted against the amber sky. When she suddenly turned and caught his gaze, he felt unexpectedly flustered, an unfamiliar sensation for someone accustomed to commanding boardrooms. "Hello, neighbor," she called, her voice carrying easily across the short distance between their balconies. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" "It is," he replied, surprised by his desire to continue the conversation. "Just arrived. Yes, literally an hour ago." Her smile was warm and genuine. "I'm Emma, by the way, Emma Collins." "James," he responded, deliberately omitting his last name. "Welcome to paradise." She laughed, the sound bright against the backdrop of crashing waves. "Is that what they call this place? I just call it much-needed vacation." "What brings you here?" he asked, curious despite himself. "Would you believe a random dart throw on a map?" Emma's eyes sparkled with amusement. "I needed somewhere to decompress, and this place won the lottery." James found himself smiling, genuinely smiling for what felt like the first time in months. "That's quite the expensive dart throw." "Oh, I got an incredible last-minute deal," she explained. "Apparently someone canceled, and I happened to call at just the right moment. Lucky me." Before James could respond, Emma glanced at her watch. "I should probably unpack before dinner. See you around, James the neighbor." With a small wave, she disappeared inside her villa. James remained on his balcony long after she'd gone, feeling something he hadn't expected to find at Sandpiper Beach: interest in another human being. The following morning, James abandoned his usual routine of ordering breakfast to his villa and ventured to the resort's oceanfront restaurant. He told himself it wasn't because of the intriguing neighbor, but when he spotted Emma at a corner table, reading a book while absent-mindedly stirring her coffee, he couldn't deny the small surge of pleasure. She looked up as he approached, recognition lighting her features. "Good morning, balcony man. Joining the land of the living today. Thought I'd see what all the fuss is about," he replied, gesturing to the bustling restaurant. "Mind if I join you, please?" Emma said, moving her bag from the chair opposite hers. "I was just enjoying the latest Rachel Montgomery novel. Have you read her work?" James carefully kept his expression neutral. Rachel Montgomery was his publishing house's biggest author, but he wasn't ready to reveal his identity yet. "I'm familiar with her books. You're enjoying it." "It's brilliant," Emma enthused. The way she captures human emotion is unparalleled. I feel like she must have lived 1,000 lives to understand people so deeply." James felt a swell of pride. He discovered Rachel Montgomery when she was an unknown writer working as a waitress. Seeing readers genuinely connect with her work reinforced why he'd built Faulkner Press in the first place, before the endless meetings and profit margins had begun to overshadow his love of literature. "What do you do, James? When you're not hiding out at beach resorts, that is." Emma's question pulled him from his thoughts. "I'm in publishing," he answered truthfully if incompletely. "Nothing too exciting." "I find that hard to believe. Publishing must be fascinating, being around stories all day." "What about you?" he deflected. "I'm a marine biologist. I work at the Ocean Conservation Institute in San Diego." Her eyes lit up as she spoke, and James found himself envying her obvious passion. "I study coral reef ecosystems and how climate change is affecting them." "That sounds genuinely important work." "It is, when we can get people to listen." She shrugged, but her dedication was evident. "I'm actually on forced vacation too. My boss said if I didn't take my accumulated leave, she'd change the lab door codes." James laughed. "Sounds familiar." They continued talking through breakfast, discovering shared interests in classic films and hiking. Emma was refreshingly direct, asking questions without pretense and listening to his answers with genuine interest. By the time they parted ways, she for a scheduled massage, he for a reluctant conference call he couldn't postpone, James realized 2 hours had passed in what felt like minutes. "Would you like to have dinner later?" he found himself asking as they prepared to leave the restaurant. The concierge mentioned there's a seafood place at the north end of the resort that's supposed to be excellent. Emma considered him for a moment, her green eyes assessing. "I'd like that, James the publisher. 7 o'clock. "Perfect," he agreed, already looking forward to the evening more than he had anticipated anything in months. That night, James arrived at the restaurant precisely at 7, having taken more care with his appearance than usual. He'd chosen a light blue button-down shirt that his sister once told him matched his eyes, and for once, left his smartwatch in the villa. Emma arrived moments later, wearing a simple emerald dress that complemented her sun-kissed skin. She'd pulled her hair back, revealing delicate earrings that caught the light as she moved. "You clean up nicely," she observed with an appreciative glance. "As do you," he replied, suddenly feeling like a much younger, less confident version of himself. The restaurant overlooked the ocean, with tables spaced for privacy and soft lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. As they settled in, James found himself uncharacteristically nervous. It had been years since he'd been on what could be considered a date, especially with someone who didn't know about his wealth or status. "So tell me about your family," Emma prompted after they'd ordered. "Any siblings?" "One sister, younger by 4 years," James replied, relaxing into the conversation. "Caroline's a surgeon in Boston, brilliant, stubborn, and the only person who still calls me Jamie. Our parents live in Connecticut, mostly retired now, but Dad still consults occasionally." "You, only child." "My parents divorced when I was 12, but they've both remarried people who make them happy. Dad's in Seattle with his wife Linda, and Mom and her husband Paul live in Arizona. We're close, though we don't see each other as often as we should." She took a sip of her wine. "What made you go into publishing?" James considered his answer carefully. "I've always loved books. The way they can transport you, teach you, change your perspective. After college, I worked at a small publishing house and realized I wanted to build something that could bring more of those transformative stories into the world." It was the truth, if not the complete story of how he'd started with a small inheritance, taken enormous risks, and built Faulkner Press into one of the most respected independent publishing houses in the country. "That's beautiful," Emma said sincerely. "It's rare to meet someone who's genuinely passionate about their work." "Says the woman who studies coral reefs," James countered with a smile. "Tell me more about your research." Emma's face animated as she described her current project. monitoring reef recovery methods in different environmental conditions. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and James found himself asking questions about marine conservation that he'd never considered before. "I'm sorry," she said eventually, looking sheepish. "I tend to go on about coral when given the chance. Most people's eyes glaze over after the first 5 minutes." "I'm not most people," James replied, surprised by how much he meant it. The evening progressed with easy conversation, laughter, and a shared dessert that Emma insisted they try. As they walked back along the beach path toward their villas, James found himself walking more slowly, reluctant for the night to end. "I enjoyed this," Emma said as they reached the point where their paths would diverge. "More than I expected to, actually." "Should I be offended by that qualifier?" James asked, amused. "Not at all, it's just—" She hesitated. "I've been so focused on work for so long that I forgot what it's like to connect with someone new. It's nice." In the moonlight, with the sound of waves creating a private cocoon around them, James felt an overwhelming urge to kiss her. Instead, he asked, "Would you like to join me for the tide pool tour tomorrow? The resort offers it at low tide in the morning." Emma's smile brightened her entire face. "I would love that. Fair warning, though, you might regret inviting a marine biologist. I'll probably bore you with facts about every creature we find." "I'll take my chances," James replied, finally giving in to the impulse to touch her, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The brief contact sent an unexpected current through him. "Good night, Emma." "Good night, James," she responded softly before turning toward her villa. As James watched her go, he realized with startling clarity that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about work, deadlines, or business strategies. His mind was filled only with the anticipation of tomorrow and the chance to see Emma Collins again. The Tide Pool Tour exceeded James's expectations, largely because of Emma's infectious enthusiasm. While the resort's guide provided basic information, Emma supplemented with fascinating details about each tiny ecosystem. James watched her gently handling a starfish to show a wide-eyed child in their group, explaining how the creature moved and ate with patience and genuine joy. "You missed your calling as a teacher," he commented as they hung back from the group. "Actually, I guest lecture at the university sometimes," she admitted. "But I prefer research. There's something about discovering new things that never gets old." Over the next week, they fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings often began with shared breakfast followed by resort activities or simple walks along the beach. James found himself opening up about aspects of his life. He rarely discussed his early struggles with dyslexia, his relationship with his parents, his love of sailing. Emma proved to be both an attentive listener and an engaging storyteller, sharing her own experiences with equal openness. One afternoon, they ventured beyond the resort boundaries to explore a nearby coastal town. In a small bookshop, Emma gravitated toward the science section while James instinctively assessed the store's layout and selection. "You really do love books," Emma observed, catching him straightening a misplaced volume. "Occupational hazard," he replied with a smile. "I notice things most people wouldn't." "Like what?" she challenged, looking around the quaint store. "Like the fact that they've organized their fiction by publication date rather than author, which is unusual. And they've prominently displayed local authors near the register, which suggests a community focus. Also, their children's section is exceptionally well curated." Emma regarded him with newfound curiosity. "You're not just in publishing, are you? You actually know the business inside out." James hesitated, then admitted, "I own a publishing company." "That's impressive," she said, seeming genuinely interested rather than impressed by potential wealth. "What kind of books do you publish?" "A mix. Literary fiction, thoughtful nonfiction, some carefully chosen commercial works." He picked up a nearby book coincidentally published by his company and added, "like this one." Emma took the book, examined it, then looked at the publisher information on the spine. Her eyes widened slightly. Faulkner Press. Wait, are you James Faulkner? The James Faulkner, he nodded, watching her reaction carefully. I just read that profile of you in Publishers Weekly last month. Emma exclaimed. They called you the last true bibliophile in a digital publishing landscape. Why didn't you say something? Honestly, it was refreshing to be just James, he admitted. No expectations, no people wanting something from me, just normal conversations. Emma's expression softened. I can understand that, though now I feel slightly embarrassed about gushing over Rachel Montgomery to her actual publisher. Don't be. Your genuine response to her work was the highlight of my day. James smiled, relieved that Emma wasn't treating him differently. And for what it's worth, Rachel would have been delighted by your comments. As they continued browsing, James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Emma now knew who he was, and nothing had changed between them. In fact, their conversation flowed even more easily as James no longer needed to carefully edit his responses. That evening, after a dinner of local seafood at a restaurant Emma had researched, they walked along the shoreline as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The beach was nearly deserted, creating an illusion that they had the entire coast to themselves. Can I ask you something personal? Emma said as they paused to watch the waves. Of course. Why did you really come here? To this resort, I mean. You seem like someone who could vacation anywhere in the world. James considered the question, appreciating her directness. My doctor actually insisted, said if I didn't take a break, I'd end up with serious health issues. He looked out at the ocean. I've been working nonstop for years, building Faulkner Press into what it is today. Somewhere along the way, I forgot why I started it in the first place. I forgot to live outside of work. Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. That resonates. My colleagues joke that I'd sleep in the lab if they'd let me. It's easy to let passion become obsession. Exactly. James turned to face her fully. But this past week has been different. Being with you has reminded me what it feels like to be present, to actually experience life instead of just moving through it. The setting sun cast a golden glow across Emma's features as she stepped closer to him. I've felt it too, she admitted softly. This connection. It's not something I was looking for, but James didn't let her finish. Closing the distance between them, he kissed her with a gentleness that belied the intensity of his feelings. Emma responded immediately, her hands coming up to rest on his chest as she pressed closer. When they finally pulled apart, James kept his arms around her waist, reluctant to break contact. I've wanted to do that since our first dinner, he confessed. What took you so long? Emma teased, her eyes sparkling in the fading light. Their relationship deepened over the following days, both physically and emotionally. They spent nights alternating between their villas, learning each other's bodies with the same curiosity and attentiveness they'd shown in conversation. James discovered Emma had a small tattoo of a seahorse on her hip, a reminder of her first research expedition, while she learned about the scar on his shoulder from a sailing accident in college. But it wasn't just physical intimacy that bound them. They shared quiet mornings watching the sunrise, spirited debates about books versus their film adaptations, and personal revelations that neither had shared with others. James told Emma about his fear that he was losing his creative vision to commercial demands, while Emma confided her worries about securing continued funding for her research. Sometimes I think about giving up academia and joining a private research foundation, she admitted one evening as they lay tangled in his bed. The constant grant writing is soul-crushing. Would that make you happier? James asked, running his fingers through her hair. Maybe, I don't know. What I do know is that this right now is the happiest I've been in years. James felt the same way, but a nagging concern had begun to grow as their time at the resort dwindled. Their respective lives awaited them in different cities, with demanding careers and established routines. Would this connection survive beyond the idyllic bubble of Sandpaper Beach? The question remained unspoken until their final weekend at the resort. They had hiked to a scenic overlook recommended by the concierge, a secluded spot with panoramic views of the coastline. As they sat sharing a picnic lunch, James finally voiced his concern. "What happens after this, when we go back to our real lives?" Emma set down her water bottle, her expression turning serious. "I've been thinking about that too. And I don't want this to end," she said simply. "I know long-distance relationships are challenging, but San Diego and San Francisco aren't that far apart. We could make it work if that's what you want too." Relief flooded through James. "It is, definitely." He took her hand. "I've never connected with anyone the way I have with you, Emma. I'm not ready to let that go." "Good, because I've already looked up flight schedules," she admitted with a laugh. "Weekend visits are completely doable. Plus, I sometimes have conferences in the Bay Area, and I'm sure you must visit San Diego occasionally for publisher things." James smiled at her vague gesture for his professional obligations. "I can certainly arrange more publisher things in San Diego." They spent their final days at the resort making concrete plans rather than vague promises. James rearranged his schedule to visit San Diego the following weekend, and Emma shared her upcoming conference calendar. They exchanged house keys, discussed favorite local restaurants to share with each other, and even joked about keeping toothbrushes at each other's places. On their last night, they requested a private dinner on James's villa balcony where they had first met. The resort staff outdid themselves, setting up a table with candles, fresh flowers, and an exquisite meal. "To new beginnings," James toasted, raising his champagne glass. "And unexpected connections," Emma added, touching her glass to his. As they dined under the stars, James realized how dramatically his perspective had shifted since arriving at Sandpiper Beach. He had come seeking solitude, convinced that disconnection was what he needed. Instead, he had found renewal through connection not just with Emma, but with his own forgotten capacity for joy and presence. "I have something for you," he said after they finished dessert. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small wrapped package. Emma looked surprised as she accepted it. "What's this for?" "Just a reminder of our time here," James explained. "Open it." Inside was a first edition of a classic marine biology text that James had arranged to have delivered overnight after Emma had mentioned it was influential in her early studies. "James, this is..." Emma ran her fingers over the embossed cover, clearly moved. "How did you even find this?" "I have connections in the rare book world," he said with a smile. "Read the inscription." Emma carefully opened to the title page where James had written, "To Emma, thank you for reminding me that the most important discoveries happen when we least expect them. With love, James." "With love," she repeated, looking up at him with shining eyes. "Yes," he confirmed, taking her hand across the table. "I love you, Emma Collins. I know it's fast and maybe it's the magic of this place, but I know what I feel." "I love you too," she whispered, leaning across the table to kiss him. "And it's not the place, it's you, just you." Later that night, as they lay awake discussing their imminent departures, James made a decision. "I'm going to make some changes when I get back," he announced. "What kind of changes?" Emma asked, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I'm going to delegate more. Promote my editorial director to a more executive role. Take back the parts of the job I actually love, finding new voices, developing writers, and let others handle the aspects that drain me." Emma nodded approvingly. "That sounds healthy. What prompted this epiphany?" "You did," James said simply. "Seeing your passion for your work made me realize I've lost touch with mine. I want to recapture that." "Well, I'm honored to have inspired such a revelation," Emma replied, settling back against him, "and selfishly pleased that a less overworked James means more time for us." The next morning brought their inevitable departure. They checked out separately. James needed to return to San Francisco for an important board meeting, while Emma was heading straight to her lab to check on experiments, but met for one final walk on the beach. 5 days, James confirmed as they stood by their respective vehicles in the resort parking lot. "I'll fly down Friday evening. I'll pick you up at the airport," Emma promised, "and I've already cleaned out a drawer for you." "That's very presumptuous, Doctor," Collins, James teased, pulling her close. I like it. Their goodbye kiss was lingering but not sad. Both felt the certainty of their next meeting, the solid plans they'd made overriding the usual post-vacation melancholy. Drive safely, Emma said as they finally parted. Call me when you get home. I will, love you. Love you too. As James watched Emma drive away, he felt none of the emptiness he had expected. Instead, he experienced a sense of anticipation not just for their reunion in 5 days, but for the new chapter they were beginning together. 6 months later, James stood in Emma's San Diego apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Are you sure about this? He asked, watching her carefully wrap a delicate coral specimen for transport. Absolutely sure, Emma confirmed, securing the protective packaging with tape. The Ocean Institute's San Francisco branch has an even better research facility, and their partnership with Berkeley means more graduate students to help with the workload. But it's a big move, James persisted, wanting her to be certain. Your whole life is here. Emma set down her packing tape and crossed to where he stood. My whole life is with you now, James, has been since that first week at Sandpiper Beach. The job transfer is just logistics. James pulled her into an embrace, still amazed by how perfectly she fit against him. Their bi-weekly commute between cities had been sustainable, but increasingly inconvenient as their relationship deepened. When Emma had announced she was applying for a transfer to San Francisco, James had been both thrilled and concerned she might regret leaving her established position. Besides, Emma added, reaching up to kiss him, your place has that amazing view of the bay. My marine biologist heart can't resist. Soon to be our place, James reminded her. Once all these boxes make their way north. The past 6 months had transformed both their lives. True to his word, James had restructured his role at Faulkner Press, focusing on acquisition and development while delegating administrative responsibilities. The change had reinvigorated his passion for publishing and noticeably improved his health. Emma had thrived too, securing a major grant for her research just 2 months after returning from Sandpiper Beach. Her paper on coral regeneration techniques had been published in a prestigious journal, bringing new attention to her work, including the offer from the San Francisco Institute. Did you confirm the movers for tomorrow? Emma asked, returning to her packing. All set for 9 a.m., James assured her, and I've taken the whole week off to help you settle in. Emma smiled gratefully. Have I mentioned lately that I love you? You might have, James replied, moving to help her with a particularly heavy box. But I never tire of hearing it. As they worked together to prepare for Emma's relocation, James reflected on how unexpectedly his life had changed course. He had gone to Sandpiper Beach seeking solitude and recuperation, convinced that disconnection was the answer to his burnout. Instead, he had found Emma and with her, a renewed connection not just to another person but to himself. 1 year to the day after they first met, James took Emma back to Sandpiper Beach Resort. He requested the same villas they had occupied during their first stay and arranged for a special dinner on the balcony where they had first spoken. This feels like coming full circle, Emma observed as they stood watching the sunset from the same spot where they'd first introduced themselves. Though I have to admit, your balcony in San Francisco has spoiled me for all other views. Is that so? James asked, slipping his arm around her waist. Nothing special about this particular balcony. Emma leaned into him, her expression softening with memory. Well, it does have the distinction of being where I first laid eyes on the handsomest publishing magnate I've ever met. High praise, considering how notoriously attractive we publishing types are, James joked, feeling the small box in his pocket grow suddenly heavier. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, James turned Emma to face him. This past year has been the best of my life, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. You've changed everything, Emma, how I see the world, how I approach my work, how I think about the future. Emma's eyes widened as James reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee before her. "I came to this resort looking for peace, never imagining I would find the love of my life on the neighboring balcony." He opened the box, revealing a platinum ring set with a sapphire the color of the ocean. "Emma Collins, will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, tears springing to her eyes. "Yes, absolutely yes." As James slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, the resort staff he'd arranged to wait discreetly inside erupted in applause, bringing out champagne and congratulations. Later that night, as they lay in each other's arms in the same villa where their relationship had blossomed, Emma traced patterns on James's chest. "Did you ever imagine, when you first came here, that you'd leave with so much more than you arrived with?" "Never," James admitted, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "I thought I needed silence and solitude. Turns out what I really needed was you." Emma smiled up at him, her engagement ring catching the moonlight streaming through the windows. "Funny how life gives you what you need, even when you're looking for something else entirely." "Indeed," James agreed, thinking of how a chance villa assignment and a sunset greeting had altered the course of his life irrevocably and wonderfully. Thank goodness for neighboring balconies.